We would like to welcome Jamie Strange from Ohio State University to come and show us the Rocky Mountain Prairie bumblebees. He will introduce himself more from that. My only announcement for really the big good of the group is that we are not having a session next week. So all eyes on Jamie. He's really great. He's here for us. Thank you so much. Now it's your show.
All right. Well, thanks, Claire. I appreciate it. So I'll just let you all know. So yeah, I am at Ohio State University now. I, however, spent 13 years at Logan, Utah at the USDA Bee Lab there, working on bumblebees. And I will just had this, I saw a bunch of names here that were at the Native Bee Monitoring Network talk yesterday about the taxonomic impediment and IDing bees. And so just thinking about that, and one of the round of questions that came up in that was, are you a taxonomist? And I do not self-identify as a taxonomist, but I do ID a lot of bumblebees. And John Koch, former student of mine, who's out at USDA now, he and I and Paul Williams did a guide to the bumblebees of the West 10 years ago, 13 years ago now, something like that. That was a good guide. It's mostly based on color characters, so but there's some other things I think that are useful. So I'm going to focus on these Intermountain West bees, ones that we had out in Utah. I'll go through, I think, probably a couple of the tricky pairs that I think people get wrong a lot. Sometimes I get wrong a lot. And some of the characters that kind of help me pull those apart. So if there's, if you come up with questions along the way, feel free to ask. I'll do my best to navigate this technology and make it work. But without further ado, I'm going to put some bees on the screen because that's why you're here.
I am actually going to pop in really quick because we did have a lot of people kind of trickle in. So if we have a bunch of new people, which I think we might, I just want to let you know the chat is open. I will be interrupting Jamie and or Sam if he's talking when you have questions. So put them in here. I'll also put my email in the chat if that's a better forum for you. But this is a participatory thing. So please talk.
I think you can see me and the bees now.
We can. The green screen's working.
I'm getting a nod from Liam, who's across the room from me, saying yes, it works. Okay, so this little critter right here. I'm going to start with the easiest bee in the universe. This is Bombus rufocinctus. That was a joke. Most of you probably who've tried to identify bees are like, this is the worst one. I actually think it's not as bad as most people get hung up on it because they're trying to put it into you see it and you get an idea like, oh, this is going to be that, and then when you try to key it out, it doesn't quite fit. But it is an interesting one in that I think it creates probably the most confusion among bees, and this is a useful one too because it's of course found really from the Atlantic to the Pacific in various spots, and my experience is that it's really patchy on the landscape, so you get into areas where there's a lot of them and then other places where you don't see them at all. Among Western bees, one of the great things about this one is that it has this sort of classic black pile on the face. There's really sometimes you get a little bit of yellow intermixed, but generally it's got a black face. And the thing that separates it from a lot of the Western bees, which typically have a lot of yellow on the face, is that it has this really short malar space. And so I'm going to talk about the malar space and what this means. So you'll notice in keys a lot that they'll say malar space is shorter than wide, or that it's longer than wide. And that's typically where we separate, or sometimes they'll say, in a key to be there that they're equal, or use a great term like sub-equal, which just I think means equal, or maybe a little shorter than equal. So so what we're really talking about is this distance between the bottom of the compound eye and the end of the mandible, or where the mandible begins, that joint of where the mandible begins, right? So this little area here, that's the length from the eye down. And then the width is from here, from where the width of where that mandible junction is to here. So you're going to look at it under the scope. You're going to see that you'll have a, there'll be a distinct spot right about here, which is the where the mandible joins, and then up to about here. So that's the width, and this is length. Now, in Bombus rufocinctus, they're conveniently very short. So relative to this length, this length is much shorter than the width of the malar space. Now,
hey, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. We have a request
Sure.
from the chat that that you use a mouse to show us the dimensions. I think not everyone is seeing the green screen effect.
All right. So, well, can you see the mouse when I'm doing it here, or is this? Are you seeing that?
I'm not seeing that mouse. I don't think we tried to use the mouse when you were doing that. There we go.
Oh, wait. The mouse, that's really odd. Okay, here you go. I was trying to use the mouse there, and I was on the wrong. I have two images in my screen, so I'm really sorry. It's a little confusing.
That's very confusing.
We're talking about, here's the bottom of the compound eye.
Now it's working. We have confirmation. Thank you.
Here is the end of where that mandible joins. Okay. So this is the width from here to here. And then the length is from the bottom of the compound eye to essentially a straight line between these two corners of where that mandible joins. Okay. So this is relatively short compared to that. And I'm going to, for those of you who are like, what does relatively short mean? I'm going to show you an example of this next critter, if I can find it. It's hard to do on a screen, folks, sorry. Yeah.
No shame, that's what we do every week. We're patient.
All right, this is Bombus fervidus. There we go. This is Bombus fervidus, and so you'll notice that here's where that mandible junction is. It's right there. So it's fairly narrow compared to this distance. This is a very large distance. So Bombus fervidus is in the subgenus Thoracobombus. These are all characterized by having relatively long faces, that long malar space. So this much longer than it is broad. And that's just to give you that contrast. A lot of the bumblebees, especially in the subgenus Pyrrhobombus, a lot of the western bees are essentially a square malar space. So the length and the width are going to be about the same. But for these, rufocinctus is easy in that it is always short. Sometimes it almost looks like there's no distance between that compound eye and where the mandible begins. So, it's a nice one to separate. As long as we're on this one right here, which is the Bombus fervidus, I'll point out again that there's a lot of black hair on the face. There's not a lot of yellow there. I'm going to try to turn it a little bit so you can see, especially between the eyes. We got a little bit of yellow, some of which is mostly, yeah. But generally, when you look at that bee, not under the microscope, that face is very black, and we'll look at some coming up that are distinctly yellow. So that's just to give you that malar space, and I just wanted to, I don't know what I just did there. Okay, let's see. Let's go back to this. There we are. Yeah, get that malar space just to show you like that what long is and what short is, and a lot of things are going to sort of fall in the middle. So with that in mind, I'm just going to approach this by taking some of the more, again, the series, either pairs or groups that are ones that are easiest to kind of pull apart in my mind, or that are difficult to pull apart in my mind, and give you some of the tips on how I do that and the characters I'm looking at. Again, feel free to type in questions, and Claire can ask them of me as we go. I'm going to start with a group that I typically think of as, it's definitely an intermountain group. Most of these occur generally at lower elevations in the Intermountain West, so they're not ones that we're going to find up in the mountains, but a couple of them will occasionally pop up at higher elevation. And And I bring elevation up because having worked in the West for years, elevation is really determinant of the kind of species you're going to run into. So communities at high elevation tend to separate out from communities at low elevation. There are some species that will go across those elevational gradients, and you'll find them at the top of the mountain and at the bottom. But in general, elevation is useful as a way to kind of separate out some species, at least to start you on the right direction. So we've got Bombus fervidus up. Bombus fervidus is, again, it's a species that's found.
I'm going to interrupt you one more time as we move into this section of bees. I think that while we were doing the green spring attempt, it was great to have your image on this side, but while we were practicing before, we also had you positioned on the other side of the screen. Do you think you can make that change? Because we're now, yep, there we go. Thank you.
This change?
Yep.
Okay.
So we can see. We're good. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to do a few adjustments too, because I gotta adjust the camera so that we're gonna be able to see more of the whole bee as we go through this. So there'll be, bear with me for a moment, folks. I'm gonna talk through these, but I need to do some swapping out here. And we'll jump into this group that includes really four species I'm going to talk about. Bombus fervidus, another one, Bombus californicus. Now, if you are following this guide, I don't know if you can see, this is the Paul Williams, sylvicola, Robin Thorpe, Leif Richardson, bumblebees of North America. There's a great key in the back to all the bees of North America, bumblebees of North America. So it is a very useful guide and a good key in there with some photos. Paul doesn't split out in this Bombus fervidus and californicus. I'm going to consider them two species here and give you my ID tips on those. I think there's still a pretty open debate as to whether those should be considered separate species or not. In the guide that John Koch and I did with Paul Williams, we did consider them separate species. So for whatever that's worth. So let me adjust my microscope a little here. And then all right, so this is Bombus fervidus, and I'll try to move it around a little bit more in a moment. I got a big wad of pollen there in our view. Maybe if I flip her over, she'll be easier to see. I'm still too zoomed in. Sorry, it's taking me a little bit to figure this out. All right, there we go. So this is a group of bees which are pretty yellow. The ones that we're going to talk about coming up here. So this is Bombus fervidus. You'll notice, the way that bumblebees are frequently identified is through color. And I think that's one of the things where people get misled frequently. They begin to rely on color. And then neglect to check other characters. And so that can be a problem if you're just simply doing site IDs in the field and, you know, sort of catch and release IDs. So it is good to look at other characters. One of the main characters that sort of separates Bombus fervidus and this group of bees, Thoracobombus, out. Again, I mentioned that long malar space. Another character, which is right here on the middle base of tarsus, is this spine that will come out. So this is your base of tarsus, and there's this spine that is found here. And this will actually be, if you zoom in, you can get, I'm not gonna try it now because you can see how much I'm struggling with just getting things into focus. But right where that cursor is, there's actually a spine here that pops out, and that's distinctive of Thoracobombus. A couple of the other species that this could be potentially confused with, like nevadensis or morrisoni, those won't have as pronounced a spine. So instead of being a really distinct point that comes out, there'll be more of a 90-degree angle. It may even be a little bit more than, or rather a little less than 90, that angle, but it won't be a distinct spine that comes out. It's a character that's good, it's diagnostic. It is often very hard to see under the scope. So it's one of those that you want to have other supporting evidence for, such as the length of this malar space. You look for this spine here. If you've got the spine and the malar space, then you're in the right subgenus. You'll notice that this bee has a lot of yellow pile on it. It's kind of can often be a very bright yellow color. Generally, you'll also see that the abdomen is predominantly yellow. So really, you know, T1 through Tergite 1 through the fourth Tergite are all going to be yellow, and it'll only be black at the end. Down here, the little tail will be black. So yellow on top, the bottom, the sternum will be black as well. So there's not yellow the whole way around, but on the dorsal side, it's going to be a pretty yellow looking bee, sort of classic bumblebee color. If I can do this, you might be able to see here. Let's see if we get this. One of the things on Bombus fervidus that's kind of nice is that usually it has, and you can sort of see here, the pin's a little bit in the way, but there's generally this black stripe that occurs between the wing bases. So this intertegular band of black pile, there's clearly some yellow intermixed here that you can see. It actually, to my naked eye, not on the camera, looks much blacker than it does from where you're sitting. But that's a good character for fervidus. Neither nevadensis nor morrisoni has that band, and I'll show you what their thoraces look like in a moment, so you can have a contrast there. But good solid black band. I'm gonna get nevadensis queued up here for you. And morrisoni coming up in a second. So I'm just going to rotate this, and next coming into view should be nevadensis. So on the back of the thorax here, what you'll note is that there's this black spot. So instead of it being a band that reaches the whole way out to the wing bases, you're going to have this black spot. So this is Bombus nevadensis once again. Yellow around right here around the wing bases. And then for further contrast, this is Bombus morrisoni. So a couple of things. Bombus morrisoni almost always fully yellow. Now, of course, an aged specimen may have some of that hair worn off. So that's where you need to be cognizant that there are other characters to identify with. Just because it's a black spot in the back doesn't make it nevadensis. But that's a good, if you do see the full yellow pile, that's a good indication that it's nevadensis, or sorry, morrisoni. At the same time, these are all going to have predominantly black faces. The longest malar space of these three species is going to be fervidus. It's going to have the longest. The next will be nevadensis, and then the shortest will be morrisoni of these three. Morrisoni will also lack any point on the on that mid-leg base of tarsus. So there's several good characters. These are the ones to look for. That the mid-leg base of tarsus coming to a point, that's going to be fervidus. The length of the malar space, again, the longest will be fervidus. The shortest will be morrisoni in this group. And yeah, I'll leave that there because I think those are probably the best characters and the least confusing. But there are a suite of characters that can separate these three out. I'm going to go back to fervidus, and I'm going to talk a little bit about fervidus versus californicus. Unless there's a specific question about either morrisoni or nevadensis. I don't think these ones are.
There's a question in the chat.
Sure.
They say repeat the spine, but I'm not entirely sure if they want to. Do you want to elaborate on that? You can unmute. I was asking the asker if they wanted to unmute and say more. So I don't know, but you could repeat what you said about the spines.
All right. So, yeah, I'm talking about, this may not be directly related to the question, but just to remind everyone that we're looking at.
I'm looking at the chat, and they added which one had a spine.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
So here's our mid-leg base of tarsus. Here's the we're looking at this little spot here, and the spine is on Bombus fervidus and also Bombus californicus, which I'm going to get to next. Those both have a spine. Nevadensis, you're going to have an angle which is going to be just slightly less than 90 degrees, but you won't have a distinct spine there. And then morrisoni, even less of an angle. So fervidus and californicus is going to have a spine. The distinction between fervidus and californicus really comes down, as far as we know at this point, to pile color. We don't have other good morphological characters. So I'm going to throw up californicus here, and I'll put up a couple, show you a few so you can see the range of variation that occurs in this species, because I think that's where a lot of the confusion comes from. It's not always a simple bee to identify, and it can look like a lot of different. Well, it can look like fervidus for sure, but it could definitely be confusing. So let me get that one over here.
Speaking of ranges, just as you go through, we would love to know more about the geographic ranges of californicus and fervidus out west, and just in general when you bring up new species.
Sure. So I'll go back to this first three I mentioned. Nevadensis is really, it's going to be west in the just east of the Rocky Mountains to the west coast. So we'll find it kind of throughout. It's throughout the Mountain West, and at some point it's a sister species to Bombus oricomus or oricomus, depending on how Latin is actually pronounced. And so yeah, nevadensis will be basically Rockies west, and you see them on the Front Range in Colorado and such as well. Fervidus, again, it goes coast to coast, really in the continental U.S. So you'll find it, and I would say probably more, I don't want to say more common in the northern half of the United States than the southern. But certainly I wouldn't rule it out in most places. And then what was the last one? Oh, morrisoni. Morrisoni is really, I'd say, pretty much restricted to the basins of the Intermountain West. So I know there's some records in California, but it's a fairly, I don't want to say common, but it's if you're going to run into it, you're going to run into it in the Great Basin, Wyoming Basin, Columbia, the Columbia Basin, Columbia River, Snake River Basin. So it's going to be fairly low elevation there, meaning it down to 4,000 feet. So, but it's not one that we typically find up at high elevations in the mountains. But yeah, restricted to a much narrower geographic area than either nevadensis or fervidus. So here's Californicus, and I think the thing to sort of highlight the difference here between this and fervidus, and I'll come back to fervidus in just a second, is how much black pile you're going to find on T2 and T3 of the abdomen. So there's black pile in here. There is on this bee, there's a yellow band here on T4, looks like. Although there's a lot of variation in Californicus. So you'll notice a little yellow pile here on T1. And again, you do get this black sort of band between the wing bases, sometimes coming into a real noted V here. But that's not always there. Again, lots of variation in this species. I'm going to just pull back real quick here to fervidus to remind you what that generally looks like. So she's pretty yellow the whole way through. And no, really importantly, no black hairs down here on T2 or T3. So that's going to be.
Hey, Jamie, we've lost your cursor somehow.
Oh, sorry, I'm on the. I think I might be on the. Was on the wrong picture. No black hairs.
It might have been all bleached out.
Yeah. Oh, it's possible. Yeah, I don't know if you can see this here. It's maybe turn off some of my lights too. So, but down here in the abdomen, if you can see that.
Actually, I'm sorry. I think you were right the first time, and it just maybe had gone on to a too pale part of the screen. My apologies.
Okay, no problem. Technology's fun, Claire. I mean, who's not having a good time right now?
We're having an adventure.
So I want to throw up another Californicus that I think is what causes a lot of confusion in between this species and fervidus. And if I get things set up for just one quick second here, I'll be right back. So all right, so maybe a little better. I might turn a light off here if I can. Oh, that turned them all off. Oh.
I think the contrast was good with that one.
Okay. What you'll notice in here on the abdomen is that while there's yellow here, and again with the naked eye you can see it very well. There's a lot of sort of dark pile mixed in here. So there's black hairs in on T2 and T3 mixed in with this yellow. And so when you're looking at the bee very directly in front of you, not under a microscope, you can see pretty well that it looks. And actually, you can see here where it looks more and more like this is there's a darker band, two darker bands right in here, right? And again, just to give you that fervidus comparison, this is very yellow. There's no hint of dark hair in here. And if you zoom in even, you would notice that there's no dark hairs intermixed on this one. So just to give you that contrast, Californicus is going to have some dark hair on the abdomen. They can be very, very yellow almost as yellow as this bee, but you will almost always have, or you will always have black hair intermixed with that yellow hair on T2 and T3 in Californicus to some degree. Fervidus, you will never have black hair intermixed. So that's the difference on these. You're going to look at that those two tergites and say, okay, do these have black hair on them? If there's any black hair mixed in there, then you know you've got Californicus. Otherwise, there's really no great characters to separate these bees other than that color character. So
do we find them in the same place?
Well, typically, it's a great question. So range-wise, Californicus is going to be it's more or less in the Rockies, in the coastal ranges. It does go down into low elevation once you get out and along the California and Oregon and Washington coasts. You'll find it there. You won't find Fervidus as much west of the Sierra Cascade range, but there are records, so I won't say you'll never find it. It's just not as common. Fervidus is found more frequently, again, at those lower elevation, drier sites. Californicus typically more in the mountains, more in more moist and cooler sites. So there is some separation habitat-wise between these two species, but there are definitely places where you can find them both. So it's not always a great habitat distinction, but generally higher elevation sites are going to be Californicus, lower elevation sites will be Fervidus. And you'll never find Fervidus, shouldn't say never, but there are not really records of Fervidus east of really the Front Range in Colorado. So once you get out into the plains, it's gone. Then you get into more Fervidus country.
We also have a question. Are the genitalia or other internal characters distinctive between Fervidus and Californicus?
That's a great question. So if you look at male genitalia, so Robin Thorpe and his Bumblebees of California has some, I'm trying to remember what's in there. I spent a long time since I've looked at Fervidus and Californicus genitalia, so I can't answer honestly on that one. And Williams doesn't, because he doesn't treat them as two species in his book. That's not in there. I'd have to go back to Thorpe and look. I can't remember. I think he had some minor differences in male genitalia, but they were not huge. Incidentally, Paul Williams doesn't split these as two species because there's some overlapping barcode sequences that make them that I think make a good argument that they could be treated as a single species. We've treated them as separate species largely due to this kind of habitat separation and also some other molecular markers that John Koch and I used and looked at and said, well, those actually do look like they're not interbreeding populations, even when those populations are adjacent to each other. And so we've chosen to treat them as separate and just maintain what that Robin had in his Bumblebees of California. But so I think it's still a reasonable argument, and some people would agree with you if you just lumped them all together and labeled them as Fervidus. So in my mind, it's just better to keep them apart at this point until we're sure. So sorry, I can't answer the genitalia question directly. I diverted that like a skilled politician, I think. So.
While spreading other good information.
Yes. There we go. Okay. So that's that first group: nevadensis, morrisoni, fervidus, and californicus. I'm sure I didn't answer all your questions, but I'm going to move on because we got other bees to look at. So the next one, so the one awesome thing for those of you who aren't familiar with Western bumblebees is that they're very colorful. So we started with the yellow and black ones, and now we're going to go to the ones that are sort of brightly, the most brightly colored of them. And This is one of my favorite bees, Bombus huntii. And you will notice as I pull her back into view here that she has a very bright colored abdomen, bright yellow or bright orange with yellow stripes. Get her position. There you go. So, this is one that's actually relatively simple to identify. A lot you can kind of do this on the wing. So huntii's distribution is, again, it's more intermountain, less high elevation. So typically basins, but you do occasionally find basins, prairies, things like that. But you do occasionally find it in in forested areas, although less so. And its range is more constrained between the Sierra Cascade crest in the west, really out to, again, the Front Range of the Rockies. And it will go north fairly far into Canada, definitely into the Prairie Provinces, the Okanagan Valley in British Columbia, and then south, the most southern populations that I think we know of are down around Mexico City, in the mountains around Mexico City. So a very broad geographic range north to south, less so east to west, but really one of those bees that tends to like to be in mountain regions, but in the lower elevation sites of those mountains. And so you typically find it out in the sagebrush steppe and areas like that. Pretty common there. And in some spots in that area, it's one of the most common bees. This is also one that we worked a lot with in rearing in the laboratory. It makes really great colonies, nice big the colonies of over 1,000 individuals have been recorded. So, and it's relatively easy to rear. So now, at least a few years ago, BioBest is a commercial bumblebee producer. They were producing huntii for sale in Western Canada. I'm not sure what the status of that is anymore. Somebody told me they may not be doing it at the moment, but anyway, it's one that can be of commercial interest, but also is pretty broadly distributed naturally and an important bee that way in ecosystems. So how to identify it? It has, I'll show you in a minute, it has a yellow face, like a lot of other bumblebees in the West. It has yellow pile on the front of the thorax, back here on the scutellum, and also this sort of black band that occurs between the wing bases. Again, you'll see that sometimes a little bit of a notch here, never really a full notch down that completely separates these two into two distinct yellow patches. It'll always be some yellow connecting there. T1 is yellow right here, primarily yellow hair. And then T2 and T3 will be orange. T4 will be yellow. And then posterior to that, it will be black. So nice distinct bands, nice crisp color changes. The pile itself tends to be relatively short. It doesn't have a shaggy look to it, and you'll see some shaggy in a minute, but this is one that's again relatively straightforward, just looking at where the color is. And let me flip her around so you can see her face. Yep. One who's showing her face a little better. Yeah. So here you go, yellow face, yellow below the wing bases, yellow above the wing bases. Nice yellow here. Notice there's no black hairs intermixed in this yellow, and then a distinct black band on the thorax between the wing bases. So that's Bombus huntii. The next one I'm going to show you for contrast. This is very similar looking species in a lot of ways. This is a very high elevation bee, Bombus sylvicola. Sorry, I thought I had the face in there better, but wait, maybe I need to do this. Get a good look at her face. Bombus sylvicola Very similar in a lot of ways. The one difference here, one of the main differences, is there's just very little yellow hair in between these wing bases. So you see a little tiny patch of yellow, but definitely not yellow up here above. And any yellow in there is intermixed with a lot of black hair on that face. So we're talking about range. This occurs again throughout the Western U.S., but it's one that you typically find only at high elevations in the Rockies. And by high elevations in the Rockies, I mean above 9,000 feet. We used to get a few in Utah. You get them in the Wasatch Range, but only at elevations above about 10,000 feet. There are some populations that are known down in the Yosemite area, but again, just at the very tops of the mountains, and then in the Cascades and in the Olympic Mountains, but only at the highest elevations above about 5,000 feet there. So as you get farther north into Canada, they become more and more common at lower elevations, but never really a super common bee. Trying to get the adjustment to the focus here for you. The other thing you'll see with this bee that's interesting, again, this is the front of the thorax. Here's the head over here, just for those of you looking. Between the wing bases, this black band. This V, black V, tends to be more distinct. This isn't maybe the best angle to view it at, but if I can twist a little bit here, maybe we can see it. Oop, I just knocked her off. So a little maybe better angle here, but a little bit more distinct of a black band. V coming on the scutellum, but again, not a nice clear cut V, like hopefully we'll see in a moment when I switch out to Bombus bifarius. And then the last thing to show you here, you're going to see the abdomen and just again the color banding pattern. So on this bee, you've got, these yellowish, whitish hairs on T1. T2 will be primarily orange. T3, same. And then T4 will also be this sort of yellow-white color, pretty light yellow. The one thing that I think this abdomen really shows nicely, and hopefully we can do a contrast here with huntii in a second, is that the length of the hair on this bee is longer than it is on huntii, and you'll notice a sort of shaggy, unkempt appearance. I don't know why they don't go to the barber, but they don't. So these ones are, kind of a little shaggier look to it. And then here, just to go back and contrast with the well-manicured Bombus huntii. So again, the shaggy, I hate to give it to you, it's a kind of a gestalt sort of feel, but when you see a lot of them, you're like, that bee looks much less shaggy than the other one. So that's a good character too. But really that face, the yellow hair on the face, huntii, predominantly black hair on the face is going to be sylvicola. And then really that separation, sylvicola is a high elevation bee, huntii is a lower elevation bee. So you're going to find huntii in the valleys, you're going to find sylvicola at the mountaintops. And rarely do they ever overlap in range just based on that elevation difference. So I won't spend, sylvicola is also one that, unless you're really collecting at high elevations, you're unlikely to run into much. The next one I want to put up is another one that's confused with this group, and I've seen it confused with both of these species, and this is Bombus melanopygus, or melanopygus, as some people say. I wish I had actually paid attention in my Latin class, but I was not a good Latin student. So here's the face. It's it's got, again, it's got some yellow here below the wing bases, some yellow above the wing bases. So that kind of gets you started on separation with sylvicola. Sylvicola is going to have much less yellow than this on the face. So there's your first clue. It doesn't quite have that pure yellow like huntii does, so it's not. It's somewhere in between, and I think the thing that's really going to be distinct that now you're going to see when we get focused in on this band of hair. This is the front of the thorax right here, and you'll notice how much black hair is intermixed in here. I think in Robin Thorpe's Bumblebees and Cuckoo Bees of California, he described it as intermixed black hair, giving it a cloudy appearance, and I think that's what you get here. Instead of this on huntii, you have that distinct yellow with no, and we're going to roll over to the huntii in just a second, distinct yellow with no black intermixed. And here's huntii. See how the difference in the brightness there, that's all yellow, no black hairs. And that's going to be the best character right there. It's that hair on the front of the thorax, and then it will lead to the other thing it makes it look like when you look down from above. You'll notice that hair, it almost doesn't look like there's really much yellow in there at all. That front of the thorax is very, very cloudy, very dark. And back here, again, back into that bright yellow. The banding pattern on the abdomen's essentially the same. It's got yellow, orange, orange, a little bit of yellow on T4, and then the black tail. So yeah, that's your best character. Look at that the cloudy shoulders, as we call them. Now I'm gonna switch out to another bee I mentioned earlier. So this is from a revision a couple of years ago. We split a species, which was Bombus bifarius, was sort of the recognized species for a long time as one of the most abundant species in the Western United States. And a couple of years ago, based on molecular evidence, we split it into two species, and now we've got Bombus bifarius and Bombus vancouverensis. Bombus bifarius, and you know, I'll tell you right now that we still don't have great morphological characters to separate these, but really geography is the number one thing. So Bombus bifarius is now restricted to the Colorado Plateau, northern New Mexico, and so you'll find it in the Colorado Rockies. We don't find it really north or west of there. It pops into just very southern Wyoming, so the Snowy Mountains, the Uinta Mountains. And then once you get north and west of that, everything is pretty much Bombus vancouverensis, although there's a lot of color convergence in these color patterns. So this is Bombus bifarius. It's got, I guess I should start with this. It's got a nice, you can see from above here, maybe you can see. Unlike sylvicola, look at that yellow on the face, a really distinct yellow patch of yellow hair there. Very little black on that face. And so if you see that really distinct yellow patch, that's going to lead you to bifarius. And then at the same time, probably the most distinct character that most people notice immediately is this black V, which bisects these two yellow patches on the scutellum. Let's see if it will focus. So this is distinct. The V goes the whole way through. If you manipulate this on the scope a little bit, you'll note black hairs just go the entire way down, and it forms a very distinct V. None of the other species have a distinction quite like that. And then with bifarius, you've got yellow on T1, you've got orange on T2. You frequently have a V of black pile that runs from T1 down into T2. That's not uncommon with this species. And then just to show you why people confuse it a lot. Here you can see those two. This is the back of the thorax. You see those two yellow tufts, really distinct. Here's the orange, and then we have, again, yellow pile on T4. And then a little black tail there. So this can be confused with those other species that we see flying around in the area, but really it is it's that notch that distinguishes it and that bright yellow face. Now, how do you tell this apart from vancouverensis? Again, these can be very difficult to tell apart. I have a unit here with some queens of Bombus vancouverensis.
Question.
Yes.
Z is asking, is vancouverensis what is referred to as neararcticus in Williams?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So the answer is yes, but it's actually more than just that. So vancouverensis, we actually, several of us wanted to use the name Nearcticus because it was much more common in the literature, but because of, taxonomy and precedence, the name vancouverensis was used first. So we had to apply that to the revision. There's still some questions. I think this is not a settled debate yet, whether what we think of vancouverensis, what we traditionally thought of as vancouverensis, which was this morph that occurred basically on Vancouver Island and the San Juan Islands in the Salish Sea, and then up along coastal Canada, even maybe into Alaska, southeast Alaska. We were calling that form vancouverensis. It's a pretty distinct looking morphotype of this complex, right? Nearcticus is the one that we sort of thought was Intermountain West, going down into California, but that name didn't have precedence. So that Nearcticus is now currently considered to be part of vancouverensis. So whether or not that gets split out in the future or not, I'm not doing that work. So maybe somebody else is. I don't know if that answers the question, but so this is our vancouverensis / Nearcticus face. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. That's our bifarius face right there. Bifarius from Colorado. This is Nearcticus / vancouverensis face. See, and once you said Nearcticus, now I'm going to call it that all day. So this is, and I just pulled out a unit of queens that I had. But you can see, again, bright yellow face, yellow on the front of the thorax, that black band between the wing bases, that, if I can get this pin to stay, I pulled the queen out just because I think, and this is true with bifarius too, how distinct that black V is on this back of the thorax, right? There's no mistaking that these are two very distinct yellow patches separated by a black V. And that's, which I think is why people always consider vancouverensis, Nearcticus, and bifarius to be a single species, is because of how distinct this was on the three of them. And now we got two species, maybe a third in the future. But the one big thing that sort of separates these is vancouverensis, Nearcticus tends to have a lot more black pile here on T2 and T3. It's not always black. There's, and I'll show you one here that is what causes a lot of this confusion. Again, a lot of variability. I think in Thorpe's Bumblebees of California, Bumblebees and Cuckoo Bees, I should say, of California, he said, remember it was him or if it was Bill Stephen in his book of Oregon, the vancouverensis has caused more, or rather, bifarius has caused more frustration among bumblebee taxonomists than any other species in America. I guess it's still true, but here's one. This is, again, vancouverensis. There's a lot more sort of, this looks yellow here. To my naked eye, it looks much more orange. You can see a little bit of darker orange in here, but orange and yellow intermixed. The bifarius from Colorado, New Mexico are going to be generally really distinct bright orange, like you saw in that other one, not this lighter yellowish orange pile. So it'll be vancouverensis will either be this yellow orange or this black that you see here versus a distinct orange band. So, but again, until I think these are really settled with better morphological characters, it's hard to pull them apart beyond just geography unless they fall at the extremes of the spectrum, because there's enough in the mid range that makes it very confusing.
I'm just popping in to say you have 5 minutes, and we don't have any questions really.
All right, that's good. I have 2 more that I want to do if that works for everybody. The next 2 species are Bombus centralis and Bombus flavifrons. And these shouldn't take too long to separate out. So I'll try to just cruise through this as best I can. You're meeting right now. This is your new best friend, Bombus centralis. And these species both occur throughout the Mountain West. There does tend to be a difference in distribution habitat-wise, and that distribution in habitat in the Intermountain West is really that centralis, again, tends to be a bee of the basins and canyons, and flavifrons tends to be a bee of higher elevation sites. And so we will, without further ado, these ones are frequently confused. Yellow face on centralis. Flip over to flavifrons. Oh no, yep, there's yellow hair on that face. It does tend to have a darker face, but warning, there's a lot of variability on both of these species as far as pile color. So, or not a lot of variability as far as pile color, but within flavifrons, there tends to be a fair amount of variability, so they can be easily confused. So there's that. The best character we use really to pull these apart is to look at the thorax. Get them up here. So this is Bombus flavifrons. Again, you'll notice on the thorax, we've got on the front of the thorax, this is much like melanopygus. The front of this thorax, there's black hair. You see these black hairs that are intermixed into the yellow hair. And sometimes it's not a lot, but there's always some intermixed hairs. And it seems to be, quite honestly, a population specific thing. Some populations are much more yellow, some are much more black within flavifrons, but there's always some intermixed here. You're always going to see a few hairs there. Contrast that with the much more bright yellow, no black hairs intermixed on centralis. So centralis, you look at this front of the thorax, these shoulders are going to be very, very yellow. Should not have any black hair intermixed there. That's kind of the best character to pull these apart. There are flavifrons, like I mentioned, has a lot of variations. So when you get out to the western populations out along the west coast, you often, instead of having this orange, as you're going to see right here, instead of having this orange here, they will have, instead it'll be black. So there'll be two yellow bands and then black bands following that. Yeah, so there's variation within flavifrons. It could be a fair amount of variation. And when you get out to the coast, it can be actually confused with other species out on the coast. But in the Intermountain West, the one you're going to run into is, and I'll show you the side view of centralis. You get that too. You can see same thing. You got a band between the wing bases. You've got T1 and T2 are yellow, T3 and T4 are orange. So easy to confuse these two. Try to get you a good view there. But just look at that. If you see this sort of general color pattern, T1 and T2 yellow, 3 and 4 orange, then look at that area in front of the wing bases on the sort of shoulders of the bee. And if you've got black hair intermixed there, then you know you've got flavifrons. So easy, right?
Awesome. Thank you. I can, yeah, are there any questions, comments, concerns?
Jamie, this is Sam. I've got a quick question. So I used to work in the Badlands of South Dakota, and so we had a bunch of huntii, but we were also concerned that we might be overlooking Turnarius. So
Yeah.
what's your, and I never really quite resolved, you know, other than geography, but there are some tension zones, and you see stuff in Montana and whatnot being ID'd.
Yeah. I'm gonna stop my share here, Sam, real quick.
Yeah.
And then, okay. Yeah, I think Turnarius. I think Turnarius almost always has a black face. And so huntii Turnarius you can usually pull apart based on that face character. But I agree, that's a tricky one. And even you know, Turnarius, because I've gotten bees out of the Black Hills, and that's definitely a spot where you get, I mean, I've gotten occidentalis and terricola from the same sites there as well. So it is a spot that you pull in these eastern bees and you pull in these western bees, and I think it's really it's fascinating, but it does make them hard to ID, because like we did that once too where we had bees from there and I was like, I think this is Turnarius, and when we ended up keying it out, that's what it came out to. But I think that's the character that I would use
face color. Yeah. Do you so one last question, do you believe in hybrids?
Yeah.
Like, do you,
sure
I mean, do you find, I mean, yes, conceptually, but do you find them and you go like, this is a hybrid, or to have molecular evidence that that's a thing? You know, it seems to be like the old literature would allocate some of these things, but my general thought is like, no, mostly there aren't a lot of hybrids around.
I think there's probably fewer hybrids than there is messiness and morphology.
Okay.
So are there, I mean, I think there's some evidence that some bees can, you know, mate with each other, but I don't, you know, I think, yeah, I'm less likely to assign something to a hybrid as a bumblebee. I think most of them are pretty distinct.
Yeah. Yeah, they just become something question mark.
Yeah, I do have a little couple of units of things I still don't know what they are. So.
Yeah, I just remember from the talks yesterday that, oh, you know, there actually you could look at, you know, maternal lines and morphology and come up with a case for actual hybrids now. But I don't really know. And that wasn't even used as a bee example. So I'm just like, is that a thing? Okay.
Yeah. Oh, queens on Turnarius have a lot of yellow in the face, Jay says. Okay.
I'll also, while you're looking at the chat, I'm going to leave the room. I need to stop the recording. I can go get the child, but I will leave the room open so you can keep talking, and point you, Jamie, to scroll up a little bit. Laurel posted a few pictures of where were we on huntii at the time, wondering if that was it. But Laurel's probably still on, and you can carry on the conversation.
Are we in the chat here?
Yeah, if you scroll up in the chat.
Okay, I see